Let's talk about a film that didn't just entertain audiences, it practically rewrote the way the world sees Scotland. The 1995 epic that made blue-face paint and kilts the unofficial uniform of rebellion and turned a centuries-old struggle into a pop culture phenomenon. It's a film that inspired countless bad Scottish accents at parties, Halloween costumes, and convinced people everywhere that yelling freedom is the answer to any problem, no matter how small. Suddenly, everyone wanted to try their hand at a Scottish brogue, and Braveheart became shorthand for standing up to the odds, even if you had no idea who William Wallace actually was. Mel Gibson's William Wallace became the face of Scottish defiance, a symbol of courage and resistance, even if the history behind the legend is more fantasy than fact. The film's sweeping battle scenes and rousing speeches made Wallace a household name, and for many, the very definition of a Scottish hero. The movie's impact was huge. It boosted Scottish tourism, inspired pilgrimages to castles and monuments, and turned Wallace into a global symbol of rebellion and national pride. People flocked to the Scottish Highlands, eager to walk in the footsteps of the legendary warrior, even if the real story was a bit more complicated. But let's be honest, the movie's version of history is about as accurate as a unicorn at a history lecture. It's a wild mix of myth, legend, and Hollywood imagination, with just enough truth to keep things interesting. Enjoying the film is absolutely fine. After all, it's a cinematic spectacle. But treating it as a reliable history lesson? Not so much. It's entertainment first, history second, and sometimes, not even that. The movie takes a real figure and a real conflict, then bakes them into a 3-hour Hollywood spectacle, complete with epic battles, stirring speeches, and a healthy dose of creative license. It's history with extra drama, more action, and a lot more face paint. Today we're slicing into that spectacle to see what's fact, what's pure fiction, and what's just plain fun. We'll separate the man from the myth, the history from the Hollywood, and the legend from the legend making. Get ready for a fact-checking mission. More kilts, fewer spreadsheets, and a lot of surprises along the way. We'll explore what the movie got right, what it got hilariously wrong, and why it still grips our imagination decades later. Because sometimes the story we want to believe is just as powerful as the truth. Let's find out if the real William Wallace would even recognize himself on that movie poster, or if he'd just laugh and reach for the blue paint. So who was the real William Wallace? Not a humble farmer, but a member of the lesser nobility. Wallace was born into a land-owning family, likely educated and trained for war. He wasn't a rustic everyman, he was a politically savvy, well-connected rebel. The ordinary man rises up angle is pure Hollywood. Real rebellion needed resources and strategy. Wallace was already an outlaw and guerrilla fighter before the events the film dramatizes. And the title Braveheart, that actually belonged to Robert the Bruce, not Wallace. So Wallace was a nobleman, a skilled commander, and a symbol of resistance. Just not the simple hero the movie shows. His real story is more complex and impressive than the legend. The man was a force of nature, but not the one Hollywood imagined. The film's emotional core is Wallace's revenge for his murdered wife, Murren, but there's no historical evidence for this. Wallace's real wife was Marion Braidfute, and her death is more legend than fact. The real rebellion was sparked by politics, not personal tragedy. Scotland was reeling from a succession crisis and English overreach. Heavy taxes, foreign garrisons, and national humiliation fueled the uprising. The infamous Prima Nocta law, total fiction. No evidence it was ever practiced. The movie turns a messy political struggle into a personal vendetta, but the truth is far more complicated. Wallace led because he was a skilled commander who tapped into widespread discontent. The real story is about sovereignty and power, not just revenge. The Battle of Stirling Bridge is iconic in the film, but the real battle hinged on the bridge itself. In reality, the narrowness of the bridge was the deciding factor, turning the river crossing into a deadly bottleneck for the English army. The Scottish forces, led by William Wallace and Andrew Murray, waited patiently as the English crossed in small numbers, then struck with devastating force. Wallace and Andrew Murray used the narrow bridge to trap and destroy the English, a brilliant tactical move the movie skips entirely. Instead of a chaotic clash in an open field, the real battle was a masterclass in using the landscape to your advantage. The Scots' understanding of the terrain allowed them to outmaneuver a much larger force, turning the tide of the war in their favor. The film's open field brawl is exciting, but the real strategy was even smarter. The Scots' victory at Stirling Bridge was not just about bravery, it was about clever planning, patience, and timing. The movie's version misses the subtlety and genius of the actual tactics. At Falkirk, the movie blames betrayal for Wallace's defeat, but history points to English longbowmen as the real game-changer. The English archers unleashed a storm of arrows that shattered the Scottish formations, making it nearly impossible for the Scots to hold their ground. The Scottish schiltrons were decimated by arrows, not just abandoned by nobles. The devastating power of the longbow was a technological leap that changed the face of medieval warfare. And it was this innovation, not just political intrigue, that led to the Scots' defeat at Falkirk. The film prefers personal drama over military reality, swapping tactical innovation and technology for simple treachery. While betrayal makes for gripping cinema, the true story is one of evolving tactics, new weapons, and the harsh realities of medieval combat. Andrew Murray, a key co-commander, is missing from the movie. His leadership and strategic mind were crucial to the Scottish victory at Stirling Bridge, yet he's all but erased from the Hollywood version. The real battles were about strategy and weaponry, not just heroics and betrayal. The Scots' use of schiltrons, tight formations of spearmen, was innovative for its time, and the English longbowmen brought a new level of devastation to the battlefield. Hollywood loves a traitor, history loves a clever plan. The drama of betrayal is easy to understand, but the brilliance of battlefield tactics is what truly shaped these historic moments. The truth is less cinematic but far more impressive. The real events reveal the ingenuity and courage of those who fought, and the complex factors that determined victory or defeat. Sometimes, the real story is the better story. When we look past the myths and the movie magic, we find a history that's richer, more nuanced, and ultimately more inspiring than fiction. The kilts in? 3 centuries too early? Wallace would have worn a tunic and leggings, not tartan. The blue face paint? That's from ancient Picts, not medieval Scots. The film's look is iconic, but totally anachronistic. The romance with Princess Isabella? Pure fiction. She was a child in France during Wallace's lifetime. The movie's timeline is wildly off, inventing a royal affair and secret heir that never happened. These details aren't just small errors, they reshape the entire story. The costumes and face paint create a wild Highlander image that's pure fantasy. The Isabella subplot adds drama, but no history. Hollywood wanted more pizzazz, so it rewrote the past. The result? A Scotland that never was but looks great on screen. Sometimes history is just a suggestion. Despite its flaws, gets some big things right. William Wallace was a real leader of a Scottish rebellion against English rule. He wasn't a king, but his rise was remarkable, and he inspired fierce loyalty. King Edward I, Longshanks, was indeed a ruthless, ambitious antagonist. The central conflict, Scotland's fight for independence, is rooted in real history. The film accurately depicts Wallace's brutal execution, hanged, drawn, and quartered as a warning to others. Most importantly, Wallace's legacy as a symbol of Scottish resistance is real. The film's spirit of defiance and inspiration echoes the true impact of Wallace's life. So, does it matter that a blockbuster film like Braveheart is a historical mess? It's a question that goes beyond just one movie, touching on how we experience the past through the lens of entertainment. When we sit down to watch a film, we're often swept up in the drama, the action, and the emotion. As a movie, its job is to entertain, not educate, and it does that brilliantly, drawing us into a world of epic battles and stirring speeches. Hollywood knows how to capture our attention. It simplifies and dramatizes, creating clear heroes and villains we can root for, and moments that stick with us long after the credits roll. By turning complex history into a story of good versus evil, filmmakers make it easier for us to connect emotionally, even if the truth is far more complicated. Changing Wallace's background and inventing a love story make the film more relatable and emotional. These creative choices help us see ourselves in the characters, even if those characters are more fiction than fact. But when millions take the movie as fact, it shapes how we see history and ourselves. The line between legend and reality can blur, influencing national identity, and even how we remember real people and events. Myths can inspire, but they can also distort, reinforcing stereotypes and oversimplifying the past. Sometimes, these stories become more powerful than the truth itself. The key is to enjoy the film, but recognize it as fiction. Appreciate the artistry and passion, but don't let it be your only source of knowledge. Let it spark your curiosity, not end your search for the truth. Use the excitement from the movie as a starting point to dig deeper, to ask questions, and to discover the real stories behind the legends. Braveheart is a gateway to history, not the final word. It opens the door, but it's up to us to walk through and explore what really happened. So cheer for the speeches and battles, but remember, the real Wallace never wore a kilt or met a princess. The truth is often stranger and sometimes even more compelling than fiction. History is messier, but just as fascinating. It's full of nuance, contradiction, and real human drama that no scriptwriter could invent. And sometimes the truth is even more inspiring than the legend. So let the story move you, but let your curiosity lead you to the real history that shaped a nation.